This is me. This is my father, Robert Rauschenberg. This is my wife, Janet Stein. My father was an artist who was primarily thought of as a painter, but was deeply driven by photography. The camera taught my father and taught me, look at these ordinary objects and don't disregard them. Let's bring the whole world into a painting. Painting shouldn't just be limited to use of flat color on a plane. Why not let it stretch its arms a little bit and reach out further into the real world? Let the real world reach out into your painting. One of the things that's really interesting if you look at the trajectory of my father's work, he starts to describe himself as a reporter, that he's going to look at the large world, bring it to you in its complexity. He's using images from Life magazine, images that you would have come across. All these things kind of tumbling around together in the way that the contents of your head are like this big crazy collage too. Buffalo 2 is from 1964. I was 13 years old at the time. Right around the time of this painting, I actually learned how to roller skate. And the studio was so big that it was like being in a skating rink. I could kind of skate around. His work is emblematic of the moment of its creation. He's got this big image of President Kennedy. Like it's got interference and static and transmission or something, you know? Even though you can look at that painting now and say, okay, well, that's the sort of biggest, clearest image, he's actually kind of putting Kennedy up in the corner a little bit, blurring the meaning of it and saying, okay, well, what was the meaning of this aside from the news story? Down in the bottom is a helicopter from Vietnam. And then you get to this image of an astronaut parachuting down out of the frame. And then you kind of swing into some sort of strong single images that are individually decipherable. He would tell you that there was something important going on, but would not try to tell you what that important thing was. This is the work that went off to the Venice Biennale. And when my dad found out that he won, he called his assistant at home and said, okay, destroy all the silkscreens that I used to make these paintings. What I was trying to do has been achieved. He wanted to talk about the larger world, the larger culture, whatever it means the day that he finished painting it, does not mean that it's going to mean that same thing a year later, 55 years later. His work, it keeps on interacting with the real world. You don't look at the world and say, well, what is the single meaning of all this? And you don't look at his painting and say, what's the single meaning of all this?